Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Michelle Rosado. I'm one of the Ability Tools Program Coordinators here at California Foundation for Independent Living Centers. I'll be moderating today's event, the Smart at Home Tech That Grows With You. And for audio description purposes, I'm a Latina woman in her 40s with fair skin and curly red hair. I'm wearing glasses and a green shirt, and behind me is a lavender Ability Tools Zoom background. So I want to go over the accessibility options available for today's meeting. If you would like to access captions today, you can do so by going to the meeting controls found at the bottom of your screen and select the CC icon titled Live Transcript. You can click the option Show Subtitle to gain access to captioning. Alternatively, you can use the stream text link, the one I just dropped into the chat, which is a great option because you can change the font size, font color, and make the captioning full screen. Please note, we try to reserve the chat for networking and interacting with one another, so have fun connecting, but questions should be entered in the Q&A located in the meeting controls at the bottom of your screen. Or you may raise your hand if that's the most accessible option, signaled with a raised hand, which is also at the bottom of your meeting controls, at the bottom of your screen. We'll be reserving the last 10 minutes of our webinar for Q&A, and we'll try our best to address everyone's questions with the time that we have. So thank you for sitting through my bit of housekeeping today, and I'll now hand it over to today's presenter, Forrest Hollerman. Thank you.
Unmuted. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. As was mentioned, we're going to be talking about smart home tech that grows with you. And let me put this into full presentation mode. Make sure everyone can see it. Give me just a second. Share screen. There. Can we confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see it for us. We're good. Thank you.
So we've got a fair amount of time allocated to today, and I won't take all of it because I oftentimes find that a lot of richness, if you will, on the topic can come out through Q&A. So put a bit more than 15 minutes on the Q&A side of things. But if there's a burning question during the course of the discussion that you really need an answer to, or you're going to forget it, or it would just help you with the understanding of the rest of the discussion, feel free to put your hand up and we can pause and then continue. So not a problem with that. So just a brief introduction. My name is Forrest Hollerman. I work with a wide variety of technologies, but I've focused mostly on smart home, smart building technology, and have been automating homes since the mid-90s, believe it or not, back when technology was a lot more challenging to get to work. I'm a huge advocate of democratizing technology, making sure that anyone can get access to smart home technology in particular. The very wealthy have been able to afford very, very sophisticated smart homes for years and years, decades. But now in the last 10 to 15 years, it has become very, very accessible to a wide range of people on the socioeconomic spectrum, and making sure that people can have access to technology from both a financial perspective, but also just a common understanding is one of the things that drives a lot of what I do. And the last decade or so, I've been focusing really heavily on both the disabled community and older adults wanting to age in place through technology. So some of you may have heard me speak in the past. If so, the first couple of slides may be repetitive. Please bear with me. I'll try to get through those. But first of all, why in general do people choose to deploy smart home technology or smart home automation? Well, obviously, comfort and convenience is very much at the top of many people's lists. Safety and security. So being able to, have a wake word on your voice assistant and have a bunch of routines that make sure that your alarm system is set and the doors are locked is a very useful thing. Health and wellness. There's a lot of benefits in the health and wellness space for doing certain types of home automation. Efficiency and economy. And a lot of folks like the novelty or the cool factor of having a smart home. I forgot to say in my intro, I may be using Alexa and Google throughout my discussion. So if you've got those devices standing by, you might want to put them on on mute, because you're going to end up hearing a lot of that over the course of the discussion. So why do people use home automation in the disabled and older adult communities? Well, a heightened sense of safety and security. If I say to Alexa, good night, Alexa, good night, and she locks my door, shuts off my home entertainment system, shuts off my lights, that's cool, that's neat, it's very convenient for me. But if it took me 45 minutes to get into bed, then it's a real nuisance and inconvenience that's beyond just a normal inconvenience for able people, right? So being able to provide that additional degree of safety and security for folks is really important. Obviously, the others, same thing as everyone else, comfort, convenience, and whatnot, but autonomy and independence. And this is the driving force behind what I do most of the time. I have had so many clients who we've automated their entire apartment or entire flat, or in some cases, a floor or two of their homes, that have just said, they have had a degree of independence that in some cases have never had in their entire lives. I've got a guy who I've done a lot of work with, and he's got arthrogryposis. And he said at the age of 70, I've never had this degree of independence. Always had to rely on people to do a bunch of things for me. And he can now change a channel on his TV with his voice. He can let people in the building with his voice. He can let people in his front door. So it's just a phenomenal emancipator for people with certain types of disabilities. So the basic elements of home automation can be really put into 6 general buckets, if you will, general categories. So it's the devices. Now, these are either information, sensors that give us information about our environment that we can act upon. So they inform, or the devices that do things for us. They act on our behalf. They perform. They could be smart locks. They could be light switches. And some devices fit in both categories. So like a smart lock will both inform you that it's locked or it's unlocked, and it will perform the action for you. A bunch of smart home appliances now coming from companies like Samsung and LG have got tremendous amounts of intelligence built into them. Washers, dryers, you name it. So it's the devices, that's like the key. But the network is how these devices physically communicate. Generally, it is wireless using protocols we'll talk about next, but sometimes they're wired using Ethernet or other types of cabling. The network in your house or in the building is what is used for these devices to communicate. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a network connection to the outside world. We'll go into that in a minute as well. Protocols are just the languages. This is nascent technology. So languages, different devices have been built around certain protocols or languages that devices speak. So the 3 big ones in smart home technology at the moment are Zigbee, Z-Wave, and TCP/IP over Wi-Fi. There is a fantastic thing that's happening this year, and that is a convergence of many manufacturers are now moving over to a common language called Matter. The first product started rolling out in October of 22. And over the next couple of years, we're going to see most major smart home devices either get their firmware upgraded or new products coming out will be Matter compliant. And this is really important. So the big 4 in this space being Apple, Amazon with their Alexa series, Google, and Samsung with their smart things. Those are the big sort of ecosystems behind smart home devices and automation. All 4 of them are behind this initiative for Matter. So in theory, very soon, you should be able to get a device for any of these manufacturers or thousands of others, and it should just work regardless of which of your hubs you've chosen.
I'm not sure if people heard this, but if you have Alexa or Google, mute those things because I might be using them quite a bit. So let's start over here. So the basic, if you already know this, just bear with me for another slide or 2. But the basic elements of any home automation environment are the devices. These are sensors. They could be anything from contact sensors on doors. It could be light sensors, any number of things, thermostat, thermometers, thermostats, things of that nature, anything that informs us about what's happening in our environment. And there are types that are that do things for us. Those are the things that perform, if you will. So they could be door locks, they could be light switches, they could be a number of things. Could be the smart knobs on a stove. And so the combination of these devices allow us to interact with our environment. But they need a physical network to communicate with each other. So it's either wireless or over wires, but that's the communication between these devices is the networks. Protocols are the languages that these devices speak. So because it's nascent, new technology, different groups of organizations got together and created certain standards or languages that their devices talk to each other with. The three primary protocols in use in smart home technology today are Z-Wave, Zigbee, and TCP/IP over Wi-Fi. Now, there's good news. This is a year that the unifying protocol called Matter is being rolled out across many of the vendors. And the four big companies that have the biggest ecosystems in the smart home space are Apple, Google, Amazon, and Samsung. And all four of them are behind this initiative called Matter. So in theory, very soon, if you have an all Apple home and you want to put in, Samsung Smart TV or, something from Google, it should all start to work very natively without having to put, crazy amount of effort into creating hubs and bridges for it. So that's good news. Hubs are the brains of a smart home environment. So this is where we run our routines and scenes. This is where we add all our devices. They act as not only the brains, but also protocol interpreters. So you could have 5 Z-Wave devices on your network, 15 Zigbees, and the rest of them are all Wi-Fi. And one of the jobs of the hub is to translate between these and let them work with each other. The human interface is how we as humans interact with our smart home environment. So it could be, if you're a visually driven person, it could be dashboards that are touchscreen dashboards that you have around your house, or you might have seen one of these Echo shows that sit in your living room or on your kitchen counter. It could be the voice assistant, so using Alexa or Hey Google or Siri. Those are the 3 main big ones in use today. And sometimes there are even folks that use haptic type of interface. So there's vibrations maybe on the desk that they're sitting at or things of that nature. So there's a number of different human interfaces, but the primary ones are dashboards and the voice assistants. And then routine scenes and automations. This is just the magic that takes all the various information from devices that are sensors, allows us to trigger events. We can do a whole number of very complicated things by creating routines. And I, for example, have a good night routine. And when I say Alexa good night, it will lock the front door and the back door if they're not locked. It will set my home alarm system to home. It will turn off my home entertainment system. It'll take my thermostat from 72 down to 66, and a handful of other things. So it's just a series of things that it does for you to make things more convenient. And in many cases, our community can be a tremendous emancipator, if you will, brings a lot of freedom to people. So those are the basic elements. Not sure if everyone is familiar with it, but I just wanted to run with you. Now, if we can scroll down to the next slide, which is it's a journey, not a destination. And this is what I mean by having your smart home technology grow with you. So as I said earlier in my introduction, I spend a lot of time with people in the disabled community and older adults wanting to age in place through the use of technology. So the very first thing we do in this whole process is we assess the environment, both the individual, their environment, and then what the needs are and the current technology in place. Then we create a plan, and we need to determine who's going to be participating in that planning process. Then we prioritize what are the most important, meaningful things that we can do right out of the starting gates to help people. And we design what is we're going to put in place. We implement it, and that includes testing and making sure it's all working properly. And then we fine tune or adjust it, and then we monitor. And as technology changes and as people's conditions change, we then need to go back and reassess and replan and prioritize. So it's really important that we understand this is not just a set it and forget it kind of environment. It's really important to keep that in the back of our minds as we're going through the whole planning process. Okay, next slide. So the first step we typically take is to assess an individual situation. So we try to see how many people are living there. If it's a person living on their own, that's got its own set of complications as well as it can simplify certain things. We look at their age and or any disabilities they have, their lifestyle and the habits. Are they very social? Are they hermits? They don't socialize at all? Do they stay in all the time? Or do they travel a lot? All those things are important. The pace of change. Now, this is really important for a number of reasons. And in getting back to that previous slide, it's a journey. That will help us in our planning process determine how often we go reassess, right? So if somebody is just doing this because they're aging and they would like technology to help them through that process and help monitor how they're doing, maybe we only reassess once a year if it's just an older adult. If it's somebody who has got a disability or condition that maybe the condition changes over time, we might need to do that every 3 months. I've got a couple of clients of mine that have multiple sclerosis, and we have a plan every 3 months. We go and assess how they're doing, anything need to change, any new technology that might help them. So it just depends on the individual situation. Excuse me.
Forrest.
The current, yeah.
I'm sorry. I know you're trying to do both things, but we just want to make sure we're on the correct slide for you. At the top, we have basic elements of home automation. Is that too far back?
No. So if we go move on to assess, the next slide.
Thank you.
Sorry.
There we go.
Okay.
There should be a little robot in the picture, correct?
Yeah, with a stethoscope.
Perfect.
That's it.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure we're caught up
Cool.
so that the viewers
Awesome.
can see.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. In fact, what I'll do is every time we switch, I'll just confirm. So anyway, so we assess the individual. We also try to take a look at the degree of dependence they have, not on technology, but on other people. So do they have a caregiver with them during their waking hours? Is it somebody that just visits them once a day? Is it, none at all? Do they have a housemate? So do they have a degree of dependence on other humans? And is some of that stuff some of that dependence we could take away through the use and implementation of good technology? And a great example of this is we have lots of clients whose adult children spend a lot of time looking after them in their later years, and that can be burdensome for some people. And so trying to remove some of that burden and make the parent or the aging adult feel like they're less of a burden on their children is something, just one of the great benefits that comes with this sometimes. It's just, what is it we can take away and give that person a higher degree of independence when it comes to other people. Then we have to look at their objectives and their expectations. And the expectations is so critical to get those set right, because you don't want them to think that everything's going to change right out of the starting gate, because sometimes there's certain things that we just can't automate, right? Then we look at technology. So what technology do they have in place? Do they have decent internet access? Unlike me today, do they have that? Do they have a smartphone? Most people do, but some don't. Can they use it? Do they have the manual dexterity and the ability to use a smartphone if they do have it? Do they have any smart home tech in place at the moment? Do they have an Alexa Echo device or a Google Home Mini or something of that nature? What other assistive technologies do they have in their place? So again, that one of these MS clients of mine, we recently voice activated a lift that can get it from the ground floor to the next floor in our house. Taking into consideration what other assistive technologies they have in their home, might have a very fancy wheelchair that is has a lot of advanced features in it. We might need to interact and automate some of that stuff. So just trying to get a handle of what else is there, and then any technology biases they might have. Some people are Apple only. I don't want anything in here that is not Apple, or some people are Android and Windows only or Linux. So trying to get a feel for that. And not only their biases, but the biases of anyone living with them, that sometimes we have to take that into consideration. Okay, can we move to the next slide, which should say plan? And confirm when we're there.
Yep, we're there.
Yes, we're good. We're good.
Okay, great. Okay. So one of the key things is to, first of all, figure out who should be involved in the planning process. So again, if it's an older couple, for example, that is planning to do this with their adult children, we might involve them. It could be friends. It could be, somebody in a community organization. It could be an independent living center. And then we also want to see who's going to be included in the ongoing journey, right? So who's going to be with us to do that reassessment in 3 months or 6 months or however often we think it's appropriate. Do we want to include any outside agencies, a service provider like my company, which is Worldwide Smart Homes? Should we be involved, either remotely or directly? Ongoing service and support, same thing. Is there a place that we can go to get support if we can't do it ourselves? And that's an important thing. And then once again, it's so critical in the planning process to set expectations for not only the user, the patient or the client, but also for anyone else that's going to be in that household and interacting with them. I can't stress that enough, setting expectations right. And then we look at technology. So what infrastructure is needed versus what's already in place. Figure out what kind of device hubs and voice assistants we want. What kind of scenes and routines and automations are going to make their lives easier and better and more safe and things of that nature. How comfortable are they with technology in general? That's an important thing on the people side. And then this last one, I promise you guys I did not do this intentionally. This last one's a classic scenario. It should be cloud-based, it should be local or hybrid. And so I'll have a whole slide dedicated to just that. Because if you're absolutely critically dependent on your smart home technology working for you, which many of our clients have become, you can't have something that just happened to me, which is I've lost my internet and there's nothing. I have to wait for Comcast to fix my problem. And if my smart home was dependent on cloud, I wouldn't be able to do anything once that's down. So that's a really important thing to think about. Let's go to the next slide, please, and let me know when we're there.
We're there.
What's the title of the slide?
Typical concerns with smart home
great.
tech.
Perfect. I just want to make sure I got the right one. Okay. So this is just a slide I put up in all my discussions for people who are new to this. There's just some general concerns with smart home and smart home technology implementation. And the reason I put this right in the planning process is these things should be discussed. So if you're living with other people, it's even more important, but privacy and security. So some people, have the fear of a big brother, and so they don't want anything that's cloud-based. They don't want any cameras involved. They just want to make sure that everything's locked down and it doesn't do anything to the outside world. Other people really don't care. It's like, I'm wide open. You just make sure it's secure enough that people aren't going to hack me, but I'm not too fussed about it. Complexity is a concern a lot of people have. More things that are automated, more things I've got to remember. What is it I'm supposed to tell Alexa to do or Google to do? How do I ask those questions? In what order? So those kind of things. The cost is often a big concern. How much does it cost to buy all this stuff? How much is the ongoing maintenance and then licensing? So in some cases, you have annual or monthly subscriptions that you got to pay for certain things. If again, it's cloud-based, and latency is a big issue. Or can be. So if I say, Alexa, turn on the light, and it has to go through 3 different cloud providers to do that thing, I take 5 seconds. Is that fast enough? Is that a big deal? Who knows? Cloud dependence, we got a whole slide on that, so I'll talk about it in a minute. The pace of change is a concern. So, in the client's condition, if we set everything up for voice control, and as is in one example, a patient of mine has got a pretty aggressive form of ALS. We had focused a whole bunch of things on her ability to use her voice. Well, she very rapidly, within 6 months, got to the point where she was no longer able to articulate clearly enough for any of the voice assistants to understand what she was asking. Then we had to completely rethink things. So that's a real important thing to take in mind. And we talked about technology biases and buy-in from other members in the house. So my parents were not particularly technology friendly, and my mother even refused to have a microwave in the house because she thought it was going to affect people's pacemakers. And so it's just understanding whether others in the home are going to be comfortable with what we put in place. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Let me know when we're there.
We're at prioritize now.
Perfect, thank you. So once we've got our planning in place, and we know what we're going to put in, what the devices are going to be, protocols and things of that nature, prioritization is really the next key. And sometimes if somebody's lived with a disability for a very long time, it'll be less obvious as to what the first things we should be looking at are. But if somebody's brand new to the condition, for example, I've got a couple of clients that have come into our environment the last couple of months who are both new quadriplegics. One 6 months ago, one a year ago, and their whole world has changed. instantly. It's not a gradual thing. It's just they've gone from their normal able-bodied self to now having to rely on everyone for everything. And so the very first thing I'd do with that kind of scenario is let's see if we can implement something like a Fire TV Cube, which is a set-top box for the TV that has Alexa built in, so they can at least do things like turn the TV on and off, change its volume, change channels, without having to wait for a caregiver to come and do that for them. Just that little bit of freedom for somebody in that scenario, particularly if they're brand new to this condition, is a huge step forward. I mean, it just really changes their outlook radically. So try to figure out what's going to have the greatest positive impact immediately and also in the long term. So some things we can't just do immediately. Sometimes we have to build into them. So just prioritizing what's going to have the most positive impact, and also what's the lowest hanging fruit. So there might be 3 or 4 things we can do immediately to make that person's environment or condition or life better, right? So sometimes it's those. What cost and sourcing issues fit into the prioritization. So we need to, do we have to get authorization from an insurance agency or from maybe an independent living center who's going to try to fund some of this stuff? All those things have to be thought about as we prioritize things. Off the shelf versus custom. So many of the things that my team gets involved in actually is custom hardware, custom circuitry, because there just isn't something available for the client. For example, that MS client of ours who we automated her lift from one floor to the other. There wasn't anything to just plug into that. It's a device with just manual switches. So we had to create something custom for that. But the more off the shelf we can get, the better, because it's easy to replace. You're not reliant on one person who might know how that thing goes together, that kind of stuff. So the more off the shelf we can get, the better, for a whole bunch of reasons. And then here's the most important part: identifying the relevant importance of any component in the system. So is it critical? If this stops working, I cease to function as through my normal everyday activities, or is it just important, or is it a nice to have? And if I don't, if I can't listen to Spotify on my Bose smart speaker for an hour or two, is that a big deal? Probably not. But if I can't get my gate to open, and I need to get out of the environment, or I can't get into my house because I can't get my gate to open or my door to open, that's a critical thing, right? So that's the kind of main part of the prioritization step. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Okay, we're at design now.
Great. So once we've got our plan in place, we've prioritized what we want to do. Now's the fun part, where we actually design the system that we're going to put in place. So we design what kind of network issues we want to have in place. Protocols, as I said, it's going to become less of an issue when Matter takes over, but for now, we still have to figure out what protocols we want to use. And it's pretty important to try to standardize as much as possible. Device location. So where do we want the hub? Where do we put the various devices so they're going to have the maximum effect on people? Do we have a choice in location? Sometimes if it's a door, you can't make any choice. That's where the door is. But there's certain things that we can design into this. Security is a big issue. All 3 aspects of security. That's access. Does somebody physically have access to the hub or other elements? Do they have we authenticated who they are? Have we authorized them to do things? So if we have a family member or a caregiver who is meant to be, going on this journey with us, we need to make sure that we got the security set up properly so they can do what they need to do. Geography is sometimes relevant. So if you live in a very urban environment, that might be a very strong reason not to use any Wi-Fi devices at all, because you might have, if you live in a multi-tenanted building, there might be 50 or 60 different Wi-Fi networks. And so that's the place you don't want to be, because your devices are going to be constantly in a congested part of the frequency range. Then we probably want to go with Zigbee or Z-Wave, So if you're in an urban environment, a rural environment, or sort of maybe a semi-urban environment, then maybe that doesn't matter. So geography is an important thing. And then accessibility. How easy is it for the caregiver or whomever to actually change things, look at things, fix things? So whether it's the user themselves or a caregiver or somebody that's part of this journey. So just making sure that's factored into the design as well. Okay, next slide.
Okay, now we're at cloud, local, or hybrid.
Great. So, as I said before, I promise I did not unplug myself from the network just to emphasize this point. But this is really, really important consideration, and this is part of the design aspects of it. But I like to spend a little bit extra time on it. So, this client of mine who's in Pacifica, California here, we've automated his entire flat, and he called me one day, and he was in a panic. He says, "Forrest, nothing's working. Like nothing's working. Alexa won't talk to me. I can't get smart things to do anything. I can't open the door. Nothing. It's just like all broken. Please help." So I sent one of my guys out, and about 3 hours, he was able to get out to about 3 hours later. And just as he arrived, everything started working again. Turns out that Amazon Web Services, AWS, had been down for 3 or 4 hours that day. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with modern computing, but most organizations have their computing infrastructure up in the cloud, and it runs on either AWS, Microsoft Azure, or Google cloud platform. And everything from your banking systems to telecommunication systems to, you name it, Spotify, all these things run in the cloud. And if that cloud is broken, nothing works. And so when AWS came back on, suddenly all of these things started working again. So we are currently working with him to make his environment entirely local, like everything local except for the ability to change TV channels because, well, if he doesn't have connectivity, he's not going to have a TV channel anyway. So that's not a big deal. But certainly all the critical and really important services we're putting onto a local only environment. So as long as he's got power, so as long as he doesn't lose actual physical AC power to his house, he's going to be able to do everything with his voice, including a local only voice assistant, a thing called Mycroft. It's not dependent on Alexa or Google or anything of that nature. It runs on a local computer. So we're in the process of that. So it's really important if people develop a technology dependence on certain things, that we try to get as many of those things off the cloud as possible. So that cloud-based is easier, simpler to set up, often cheaper. They can be more expensive to run because there can be monthly fees that they're put in, or annual fees for web services. Latency is a really big issue. So the more hops you have and the more services that are required that are sitting in the cloud, it becomes an issue. And you just have all these multiple points of failure, right? Local only can be a lot more complex to get going, but you're not prone to any of the whims and foibles of vendors if they change their business model, availability. I had a bunch of clients that started out their journey using Wink, W-I-N-K, as the hub. And you paid, I don't know, $150 for your hub, and you thought you were away and clear, and suddenly they started having financial challenges as an organization. So they decided to introduce I don't know, $5 a month fee to use the service, something you already paid for without telling anyone. So a lot of people just threw those things out and replaced it with something else. So yeah, sometimes these things happen. Low latency is what you typically get in a local only environment because everything is local. Nothing's going to the cloud, so it's much faster. And then, as I said, everything works even if the internet is down. All right, next slide, please.
Implement.
Okay, great. So as we implement, we try to look at infrastructure first. It's always important. So we got to get the hub and the network aspects physically put in place first. And as I said, try to standardize as much as possible. If we have everything on Zigbee or everything on Z-Wave, it's just much easier to diagnose. Those are two protocols that the more devices you have that are powered, not battery powered, but mains powered, the stronger and faster the networks become. It sounds counterintuitive, but it just means because they're mesh networks, every device on your network, if it's a Zigbee or Z-Wave, just needs to talk to the next nearest Z-Wave or Zigbee device, and they find that they figure out what the quickest path back to the hub is. With Wi-Fi, everything talks to a single point, directly to the hub. And so, standardizing on the infrastructure is really important. Then we implement the hubs and the devices and the voice assistants, get those things, the basic devices. And then we start setting up the routines and the scenes and the automations. So I really didn't go into details as to what a scene is, the difference between a scene and a routine. But a scene is just a setting, environmental settings. Like I have my movie scene. So when I say, Alexa, entertain us, and she dims the light in the living room, turns on the entertainment system, puts some LED lighting around the edges, does a handful of just fun little things. Well, scenes can be a lot more than just cool. But that's a scene versus a routine, which is a set of steps that are actions based on either human telling something to do or based on an event that's happened, right? A very trivial example, my son, 14-year-old son, has got a reptile tank, and I've just got a routine. It's just constantly checking for the temperature. And if it goes over 95, it shuts the heater off. And if it goes below 70, it shuts the heater back on. So it can be that trivial, or it can be a very complex routine. So getting those things put in place and testing them is really important. Notifications and escalations. So this is, I'll give you a good example why this can be important. We have a client who one morning didn't wake up, and fortunately his wife was with him. She couldn't wake him up. The EMTs couldn't wake him up, so they took him into the hospital and found out his insulin level dropped to 35. 100 is normal, for those of you who don't know. So he would have ended up in a diabetic coma if his wife hadn't been there. Well, we've since put sensors in all the rooms in the house, so if she's not there, and she does go away from time to time, it knows that he typically gets up between 7 and 7:15 and goes and makes his coffee. If that doesn't happen now, if there's no motion in the hallway or in the kitchen by the time 8 o'clock comes around, and we send a text message to his wife. Well, first, the first thing we do is we have Alexa kind of get louder and louder, say, "John, are you okay? John, are you okay?" No response. We send a text to his wife, to his 2 adult children that live nearby. Still no response from them. Then we send something to 2 next door neighbors, and a couple minutes later, we'll send out a 911 alert. So this just gives you one example of the notifications and escalations that we can build into some of these things, and it's really important for a lot of our clients to be able to have this kind of thing. And making sure our service and support is in place. So what happens? Who do I call if something doesn't work? Like in Larry's case, he called me because he's got my personal telephone number. He says, "Nothing's working. Can you help me fix it?" Well, that stuff has to be in place as part of the implementation. And then once again, I know you're tired of hearing me say it, but expectation management, just making sure that everyone, it's part of the journey, especially the client or the patient or however you want to word it, has their expectations set. This is not necessarily going to be a instant success. It's going to take some time. We're going to need to bed it in and tweak things and fix things, and that leads us to our next slide.
Now we're at adjust and fine tune, tweak.
Okay, perfect. So this happens in any new system, right? It doesn't matter whether it's a home automation system, a brand new banking system you put in for a bank, it could be a telco system. Whenever you go live, you're generally gonna have initial sort of bugs and tweaks and things you just gotta fix, right? So it happens after the initial implementation and testing. It's generally an ongoing process. Things change. People's conditions change. I forgot. I'd like to have a smart switch in the hallway so I can turn that light on as well. We didn't think about that in the planning process or whatever. And new systems just take a while to settle in. You find some of the weirdest things. So not to get too techie on people, but Zigbee and the Wi-Fi band that most smart home devices use the 2.4 gigahertz band, part of the spectrum. Well, guess what? A microwave oven does too. And if you have a microwave oven that is not maybe necessarily a new one and is somewhere near a hub or one of the devices, sometimes we find out there's some weird thing happening. Sometimes my stuff works and sometimes it doesn't. Well, guess what? We found out that when the microwave's running, the communication is broken. So just figuring things like that, it just happens, right? So we just need to figure that kind of stuff out. And then here's a really important one: training anyone else as part of the journey, the caregivers, if there are any, loved ones, friends, whomever's going to come over often. If the person isn't able to do these things themselves, teach these folks how to add devices, how to change routines, how to create new routines. That can be really useful as well. So you don't want to be calling people like me all the time to do stuff like that when it's pretty basic, right? So a good example here is one of these new clients of ours that I mentioned is a fairly new quadriplegic. We've automated the controls on his bed so he can have the head up, head down, feet up, feet down. And we did it in 5-second increments. Well, he wanted it even more fine-tuned. So it takes a while to set up all these little routines. So I just showed his caregiver how to do it. And so now he can adjust that however he wants. So just things like that. So making sure that we train anyone else who's part of the journey how to do these things is very useful. Okay, next slide.
Now we're at monitor.
Cool. So in this whole process, we're trying to automate as much as possible. Again, it just, in certain scenarios, it makes a lot of sense for people who have got ambulatory and dexterity issues. It can be really important to automate just about everything. If it's visual impairment or potentially audio challenges, that might have a different set of things that we automate and things we just don't because it's not necessary. But automating as much as possible, that is relevant and important to that particular person's condition and situation. And then schedule regular periodic checks in the system, right? So most of these systems, most sensors, we can automatically have tell us if the battery is going low, but that's not always the case. So making sure that we do check those from time to time, make sure the firmware updates are put in place if they're not automated, make sure the network's running nicely. Who knows, maybe a neighbor moved in next door and put in a really strong, internet router right next to where our hub is, and it's now causing issues, right? So always just checking these things and then checking the routines to make sure they're still useful and they're still functional, right? If has something happened in either the technology space or the individual's conditions or environment that would want us to change these routines, get rid of some routines. So just doing a regular check is important. Keeping an eye on an individual's condition is also a really important thing, and we can automate some of that. So that example of Joe who had the insulin drop, because we put sensors in his house to see what he's doing, we can also track and say, Joe, when we first put this in, it took him 45 seconds on average to get from his bedroom to his kitchen to make coffee every morning. Over time, he's now taking almost 2 minutes to do that same journey down the hallway. Somebody should be made aware of that. He might not even notice, right? So making sure that maybe the physician or whoever the primary caregiver is, or somebody should be made aware that his condition is changing, and it might be so subtle that nobody notices. So we can do things like that. And then obviously, constantly making sure that alerts, notifications, and escalations are appropriate. If somebody's changed a telephone number and they're on the escalation tree, well, we need to make sure that's changed, right? So things of that nature. And then here's the most important part from my perspective, and this is my job, is staying abreast of all the evolving smart home technologies and offerings. Just last month, a company called Akara released it's a presence sensor. It's not a motion sensor. It's not passive infrared. It actually uses what they call micro radar to take a look at what's happening in a room, and you can break a room into 30 different zones. And if you mount it on the ceiling, you can even see if somebody's fallen. So one of the problems we have with older adults is you need something that's on their physical body to detect whether they've fallen or not. And typically smart watches are where people go, but those need to be recharged daily. And a lot of folks forget to charge. So having something that's not attached to the person and being able to just monitor and see that this person has fallen, and we can set off an alert. We can inquire as to if the person's okay over the smart speaker. That kind of stuff is really important. And that just came out. That device just got released last month. So constantly keeping abreast of what comes out that allows us to add, incremental or radical, adjustments to the environment. So those are the main steps that we typically recommend people take. And as I said right up front, let's go to the last slide. It is a journey, not a destination. So constantly making sure that we look at all aspects of this and reassess and replan whenever that's appropriate for the individual and for the environment is critical. That's what I wanted to say. Again, I apologize for the technical glitch we had earlier. Catherine and company, let's open the floor to questions.
Wonderful. We have quite a few, so I'm going to try to shoot them at you. We're at 3:37 now, so let's see if we can get through them. Give me one sec. So first one is from Rick. It says, since my dishwasher, oven, stove, and thermostat in my apartment are not digital, and because I am blind, what are my options?
Okay, it's a very good question. So this is even asked to people who are fully able. You can put a multi-sensor, and the ones I use are from a company called Aotech. And these multi-sensors, they can sense temperature, humidity, open and close, and vibration. So an example on a dishwasher, a washing machine, or a dryer, I can put those on and say, okay, as soon as it detects that there's vibration, as soon as that vibration stops for 10 minutes or longer, send me an alert to say the laundry's done, or the washing machine's done, or the dryer's done. Another thing that you can do is you can plug these devices into a smart outlet, and it will read the power consumption. And as soon as the power consumption drops to nominal, as opposed to under full load, we can set an alert. We can make an audio alert for somebody who's got visual challenges. We can make it a light flashing if it's somebody who doesn't have full use of their hearing. So how we let the person know that these cycles are finished is part of how we plan around that particular individual's conditions. But there's multiple ways we can take a dumb old device and smarten it up so we can tell us whether it's on, off, things of that nature. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. And this next one is from Patrick. What do you think of a microwave oven that scans a UPC code on a food product, tells the user what to, for example, put food in a microwave, and then it automatically sets the power and timer so the user doesn't have to read or press any buttons? It automatically.
Yeah, so there's a couple.
Oh,
sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, there's a little bit more. It automatically cooks the food per the manufacturer's instructions with minimal interaction needed by the user who may be visually or mentally impaired.
Perfect question. There are at least 3 different products I'm aware of on the market that do that. The ones I'm aware of, you have to buy from the food from them. It's not just something you can get from any grocery store and it's just read the barcode. You actually order your food through these organizations. There's somebody on the call who's got probably more experience with that than I have.
I was going to say, are you alluding to me, Forrest?
Indeed.
Forrest knows that this is my favorite, one of my favorite smart devices in my home. I'm going to go ahead and go camera on for a moment. So one of my favorite smart devices in the home is called the Tovala Smart Oven. It's pretty amazing. I share my home with my little sister. We're roommates, and she has Down syndrome. And the Tovala has made it so that she has a very, very much greater sense of independence. She's able to prepare her breakfast independently, to prepare her lunches independently. And if you do decide to have their meal service, she has dinners that she can cook for the entire family with the meal service. And she's an equal participant in the maintenance of our home. The smart oven does not require you to have the meals. You can cancel it. We actually don't currently have them right now. But you can go on the app, and there are a lot of basic recipes. Like you can select scrambled eggs with sausage, and select a grilled, so to speak, salmon fillet. And there's also the ability to scan the QR codes for their meals, but you can also scan barcodes for select producers. Like I think that they have Foster Farms, I think Amy's Organics, really big names in the frozen food industry who are participating, and they have tested the products to see how to best cook them. It knows whether to apply steam, broil, or bake, whatever you need to do to make the optimal outcome of that item. And you can scan the barcode, and it will automatically have the food cook at the correct time, temperature, and with all of the specific settings it needs to finish. It's a pretty fantastic device. It's really great for people who would prefer to have plain language or no language instructions. It's really great for individuals who have low vision or for people who have disabilities that relate to their memories. Because if you forget that your item is in the oven, it stops cooking after the assigned time. And so you're not going to have a blackened smoke billowing out of your oven. And it's a nice little countertop device, doesn't need to be installed. So that's my pitch for Tovala. I think it's great.
Yeah, I've had others rave over Tovala as well, but nothing like a first-hand user experience to highlight that.
Perfect.
Other questions?
Okay. Yes, we still have more. Next one's from Rachel, and Catherine attempted to answer this, but maybe you have some more input for us. I've had some people from the aging space ask if there is a way to set up the Echo Show drop-in feature without the user owning a smartphone. This is a barrier
Yes.
for their residents and can't afford or don't wish to have a smartphone. Do you know if this is possible?
So this I encounter this with the aging adult community a lot. A lot of older folks just they either just never had a smartphone or just don't see any need for it. And what I always advise people to do is if whoever's trying to set things up with them, whether it's an adult child, if it's a friend, if it's a caregiver or whatever, to go down and you get these on the end units, end caps of aisles and grocery stores where you have gift cards and stuff. You'll usually find 2 or 3 companies that are selling pay-as-you-go cell phone contracts. They're not contracts. They're just, you buy, it includes a little SIM you put in your phone. And so you take your phone to the person's place, you pop the SIM in. All you need is to set up, you need a cell phone number to set up the Alexa Amazon account. It's not Alexa account, it's an Amazon account. So you go through the whole account setup process using that SIM. And then once it's set up and you've responded, I think they send you a text to confirm. Once you've texted back, that device is now attached to that SIM. Then you take the SIM out of your telephone. And I always recommend people just tape it to the bottom or the back of the Echo device. So if you ever need it again, you know where it is, and done, you're set up. So that's by far the easiest and most cost effective. And these are usually like 10 or 15 bucks.
Thank you. That's
And
perfect.
and that really is a set it and forget it type thing.
Wonderful. That's a good answer. Okay, from Rebecca, I'm curious, how would people get help in setting up their smart home?
There's a number of answers to that. So my team is in the process of building an entire course. It's going to have 3 flavors, if you will. The initial implementation is aimed at people who are able to do it themselves. Maybe it's like a 55 to 75-year-old range of folks that wanting to age in place and use tech to do it. And it's a course that will guide them through all aspects of what we talked about today and then some. And they'll be able to follow that and do many of these things, including the planning process. Then we'll repackage that slightly and aim it at adult children or caregivers or friends of people who aren't able to do that anymore. They're past that point. So, and then the third version is really aimed at the disabled community. And there'll be certain things that, for example, are really aimed at folks with visual impairments. Other things that are focused entirely on audio impairment. Other things on ambulatory and dexterity. So cognitive, right? So that's the one answer. It's not ready yet, but we're working on that. There are also a bunch of people in the smart home ecosystem, if you will, that even if you go up onto Facebook, that's one great place to go. Reddit has got some forums for aging in place, people with disabilities using smart home tech. So there's lots of folks out there, rich communities that are willing to help and do things of that nature. And then there's commercial organizations like ours that will go in and sit down and do these things for people. So there's a lot out there. And then there's also a lot of academic research going into how we can take this. So Catherine and I have been in discussions with folks out at the University of Pittsburgh, I think it is. And, they've got a whole bunch of PhD students trying to figure out answers to that question as well. So it's a rapidly growing space using smart home tech to help people in these various communities. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but it's out there. And sometimes it's just a matter of somebody like us pointing you to where somebody you can, rely on locally. We have a growing network of folks that we just introduce. So
And
what I'll do is I'll put up my slide with my. If you slide down to the very last slide, we're in the middle of questions and comments, but just go down to the very last. There's a blank slide and the very last one. So we've just done a change. And so we're in the process of rolling out a brand new website with all kinds of self-help guides. So don't go there now, but give it a couple of weeks and there's going to be, a section for product reviews and, if there might be 5 different ways of solving a problem. Like the gentleman or the person who asked earlier about, how do I, take a dumb appliance and smarten it up? There'll be a section on that. like 3 different ways to do that, and some links to the tools or the products you would need to get that, as well as videos. We're not in the process of, we're not in the business of creating content. We're going to be curating content. So, you know, for anyone who wants to put in a Smart Things hub, there are 10 people who've done a bunch of fantastic videos on how to do it. We don't need to add to that, but we'll put links to the top 3. So there'll be a pretty rich set of resources there within the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Okay. So the next one is another common question or concern. This one comes from Rachel. We get is people not wanting, hold on. We're sharing your last slide with your information on there. So it says worldwidesmarthomes.com. I'll go back to the question in just a sec, everyone. Forrest Holloman, Forrest at worldwidesmarthomes.com. And the phone number here is 650-263-1141. And we're going to leave this slide up while we answer these last questions. Give me just a sec so I can find this again.
We have another 10 minutes or so.
Yes. So I'm sorry, we're on Rachel's question. Another common question or concern is we get is people not wanting their smart devices to spy or listen in on them. How do you discuss this with potential users, and are there any resources you point them to so they can be more informed on what their smart home devices are doing?
That's a good question. So we encounter this a lot, particularly in situations where we have adult children of older adults that they're trying to introduce. My next door neighbor, like immediately next door, she's had this challenge. So she's got her mother is in her late 80s, lives on her own, and her daughter lives about 15 minutes away. And it was not an easy conversation to have. Sometimes it comes just down to ego. It's like, no, I can look after myself. I don't need you popping in and spying in on me. It's like, I'm fine. And you just have to have those tough discussions saying, you know, sometimes it takes a drastic event, right? So in this case, she fell down in her own home a couple of times and wasn't able to get any assistance. And fortunately, we live right next door. So we were able to pop over and check on her. But it really is, it's about the communication. Again, setting expectations, letting the person know what they can and cannot expect. I mean, you can even have it in a situation where the camera is off, but you're able to drop in vocally, right? So that sometimes helps people feel better. It's like, I don't want you spying on me. Or if you do, maybe just make it the Echo device that's sitting in the kitchen counter and none of the other rooms, right? So maybe that's a workaround or a compromise. So it really is, it's not an easy thing. The vast majority of the times that we encounter this, and it is very frequent, is just about the relationship. Who's got the best relationship with the individual that needs the oversight or needs monitoring, and it's how they communicate and kind of get them to understand that it's in their best interest. So not always possible. I've come across some that not because they're Luddites, but they just didn't want anybody looking after them or looking in on them. So there's no one answer for that.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you again. We've got a few more. We still have about 8 minutes. If you're up for it, let's keep going.
Sure.
This one's from Marisol. What would you say is a backup plan if there's a power failure? That's a good one.
Yeah, so we encounter this a lot. So I've got a very good friend of mine who relies on the CPAP for his sleep at night. And we figured out that a certain type of UPS, that stands for uninterruptible power supply, was sufficient for his purposes. So if he loses power, his CPAP continues to work and things of that nature. Typically need to find out what are the absolutely essential devices that need power. And we figure out what the maximum draw of that is and how long we think an outage might be, and then we plan around that. And some people actually need to go, if they're in an environment like on the coast here in California, there's certain places during wildfire season where you might be 2 to 3 days without power. And in that case, you're probably gonna need a backup generator or a solar, one of these solar panels and kind of like a Tesla Powerwall. that is sometimes the route people need to go, because it's not feasible for them to go for days at a time without power. So it depends on where you are, how likely it is to go out, how frequently, how long, and we just need to calculate the most important things to keep alive, and then you can base your decisions on that. Another neighbor of ours out of the coast here, they also were getting increasingly frustrated, so they went and got one of these gas-based generators. So it runs on natural gas that they use for cooking and things of that nature. And as soon as there's a power outage, it automatically fires on and their power's back up in seconds. So it depends on budget, need, and location, and likelihood of this happening, frequency and duration. So again, there's not a one-size-fits-all answer for that question.
Thank you. This one's from Rachel. Do you have experience with using NFC tags with your clients to enable home automations? And if so, what are the pros or cons that you found with them?
Yes, we have a lot of experience with that for two different reasons. So I've got a partner in the business who's got a different business, and he manages mobile workforces, mostly security guard companies, and they use NFC tags for the security guards to go around their beats. Every place where they're supposed to do an inspection, there's a tag, and so he's got an entire system set up for notifications and event tagging and logging and things of that nature. So we've got in-house, we've got somebody who understands the NFC RFID space inside and out. But personally, I've been working with a couple in San Francisco who one of the partners is she's a wheelchair user, and we had to figure out different ways to let it give her access without her voice, because she's her vocal ability is starting to decline a bit, and so Siri is having a more difficult time understanding a command. So in her case, we put an RFID tag, and you can, NFC or RFID are very similar, and you can boost the signal and get a really thick card that will make the range much greater. And so in her case, we did this so she can, as long as she's within 10 feet of the reader, that particular device will open for her. So if her chair approaches the gate that's in her yard on the south side of her house, as long as she gets within 10 feet of that, it'll automatically open. Same thing with the gate. The elevator that we put. In that case, we wanted it has to be right next to us. Got to be no further away than 3 inches for the gate to activate. And the reason for that is we don't want her halfway onto the elevator and it starts going up, right? So you can dial in and dial out the sensitivity and the range on NFC and RFID really well. That's one angle. Another option is using QR codes. You can attach a camera to somebody's wheelchair, and as soon as they get in range of a QR code, it can activate an automation as well. So there's several ways of doing it. There's Bluetooth beacons that can be done. So there are multiple ways of skinning that cat, so to speak. Hope that answered the question.
And I think I'm gonna lump 2 together, one from Devette and one from Rachel. What was the name of the device for falls that came out recently? And what was the name of the multi-sensor again that you use for microwaves, washing machines, and etc.?
So and feel free, by the way, to anyone who's listening, if you have further follow-up questions, feel free to email me directly on that number. No problem at all. I'll send you direct links to these things if you want them. So just send me an email. But the presence sensor is called the ACARA, and it's AQARA. There's no U in it. So it's AQARA. They pronounce it ACARA, and it's FP2 as a product. Foxtrot Papa 2. I'm not sure what that stands for, but it's quite a nifty new device, and they're doing some firmware upgrades. It's got some bunch of different reviews, and again, if you send me an email, I'll send you links to people who've reviewed it and shown it in action. It's pretty clever. I want to get my hands on it. They're very difficult to get right now because they're out of stock. They're just released, and the initial orders, I think, exceeded their expectations. So as soon as I've had a chance to play with one, I can give better feedback. And then the multi-sensor, you can just go on Amazon and type in multi-sensor or vibration sensor, and there's a bunch of them. The one I use is branded SmartThings, or Samsung SmartThings, because when Samsung bought the company SmartThings, they were manufacturing hardware such as hubs and sensors and all kinds of different things. And then Samsung decided to get out of the hardware business, and they just own the ecosystem, the whole SmartThings ecosystem, and they're building it into many of their high-end products. Excuse me. But they licensed all the hardware they had to a company called Aquara. That's A-Q-U-A-R-A. Aquara. No, sorry, wrong. It's AOTech. A-E-O-T-E-C. AOTech. And they've got this multi-sensor that will detect vibrations as well.
Okay.
And then there's a bunch of, and again, feel free to send me email, but there's a bunch of vendors that have devices that will monitor the power being consumed by a device. So again, that's another way of telling whether your load wash is done, your dishwasher is done, things of that nature.
And I'm going to finish it with one last one. Do you service all of California? And do you know if insurance like Medi-Cal might cover any of these services? That's part of a question.
So to answer the second question first, I have found some folks able to get some of these things covered by insurance. I know one gentleman who wanted us to automate the bed controls for his new bed, was able to get that device and implementation covered. But I think it's very difficult. You have to spend hours on the phone with people and trying to justify your cause. And the other answer to the question, we focus heavily on Northern California, but if the need is great enough, we can send somebody down to other parts of California. And we also have affiliated companies that do the same kind of stuff that we do. We can generally guide you to, even outside of the state.
Perfect. We are literally a few seconds from 4 o'clock, and we just wanted to thank everyone for joining us. You have Forrest's email if you'd like to send him any of those questions directly, but we have to let you guys go because our interpreters stop at 4. So thank you everyone again for your time. We really appreciate it.
Time and patience with the technical glitch. Thanks, guys.
Yes, thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.